and welcome to the High Octane Friends podcast. I'm your co-host, Rob McMullan, aka Robbie Mac. So a few things about me, like the venerable basset hound, I'm friendly and can sniff out good deals. I make friends everywhere, pretty much. And like a basset hound, I can't program a computer worth a damn, even though I worked a lot in tech and finance. I dislike immensely the words visionary, genius, and amazing lover, but I am what I am. My hobbies include watching TV, chasing waterfalls, and annoying my adolescent son. Yes, as he does to me. And it'll become a little relevant later on. I recall I wore a flat cap backwards while I was at Harvard to make, really in an effort to make me appear smarter, hide my insecurities, smarter than the other grad students, which I probably wasn't. Statistically anyway, but then again, I don't know, maybe I was smarter because just like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, I dropped out. Random fun fact about me, I once got drop kicked by a very muscular lesbian while dancing apparently badly in a Vancouver nightclub. Love affair, for those of you who remember, have fond memories of it. So I don't know, maybe I wasn't being very basset hound like that night and just can't remember, probably drank too much. I've more seriously started, managed, and advised multiple companies in North America and Asia. I've also helped some tech startups raise millions of dollars worth of investment capital, but I'd say I'm particularly proud of and actually amused by the fact that still till this day, the most money I've made to date is from my very first company that I started in Tokyo, where I lived for 5 years. And at the time, it was the most expensive city in the world. I did it with literally zero money. So, over to Trevor.
Awesome. Hi there. Thanks very much, Rob. As for me, my name is Trevor McKee. I originally here from South Africa and then moved to the United States and then to Canada, moving to Toronto 20 years ago, and really loved it ever since. So some people say that my career spans my travels mimic a certain famous billionaire Elon Musk. That the cachet in that is rises and falls based on various social media posts, but it's been an exciting time. I haven't lived in quite as many places as Rob, but it's been interesting. So I have many various hobbies. I like nerdy stuff like 3D printing, laser cutting, and building various things. We've got a garden in our postage stamp sized backyard that my wife and I like to get into to kind of get away from things and grow various veggies and stuff that that my 3 kids consume. And then I've also started doing some stand-up comedy sets at open mics around Toronto and in other places, and with varying degrees of success, more as kind of a exercise to in kind of public speaking and reaching out and approaching new people. So it's been an exciting time there, then on the work side, I am a biomedical engineer by training. Did my training in the States, undergrad at University of Buffalo, PhD in bioengineering from MIT, where I worked in a Harvard Med School lab and did a lot of various activities in the space of sort of computer vision and image processing for cancer research that I continued on in my work in Toronto, and have started a couple of startup companies over the course of my tenure, and that we'll probably get into more as we go into the episode itself. So
great. Yeah, super great. Yep. Thanks for that, Trevor. So let's get started on today's episode, shall we? Which is well, actually, before I do that, let me intro, since this is our very first episode for this podcast, which we called High Octane Friends. So Trevor and I talk about interesting topics from shallow to deep, and try to do it in in a non-boring, authentic, and I think importantly, unvarnished way. And in the emphasis on friends, and in later episodes, we'll be interviewing some really smart, interesting people, as you can imagine. We're fortunate enough to have access to some degree through our experience and our academic experiences. The topic of today's podcast, though, is about the secrets of successful entrepreneurship, sort of what to do and what not to do. And there's a lot to unpack there. So this theme, I think, will be one we repeat numerous times, and is something we're both passionate about and have something to say about. Since we're at least a day and a half over 20 now. So let's start by telling a few gems from our own experiences so far, and we'll just kind of be. We've got some things we want to glom onto here and share with you. One that I think is really important, but I actually, in all candid.
Rob, maybe just move over just a tad because I think.
Oh, am I out of the frame? Oh,
yeah, there we go.
Maybe
All good.
hide from some of these things that I'm.
Camera shy.
Yeah, we haven't quite worked out the bugs, folks. So please.
We're doing this live.
Yeah, we promise it will at some point be exponential, but I don't know. You might be here for a while. Yeah, I was just saying, and in all candidness, something that I recognize is really, really important, but I didn't come across until very recently this particular quote from Charlie Munger, who was sadly passed away just I think it was the end of last year. Warren Buffett's business partner. I actually liked him a lot better, not that I dislike Warren Buffett, who does, but he had a quote attributed to him that basically, there's an old two-part success rule. One, take a simple, basic idea, and two, take it very seriously, which they both have. So I think this is probably paramount to everything else we could say. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? That's part of that. Take a simple, basic idea. I think this is part probably of what a lot of the companies do that have difficulty with, that are kind of in or inspired by Silicon Valley type businesses where, and I'm sure, Trevor, you and I have seen a lot of this, like people, usually very smart people, but constantly trying to outsmart others. When you're on, you're in some of those rarefied air rooms that we've been in over the years, that I think that is a common thing, right? But
yeah, like trying to build a super complicated, widget that depends on so many different things to succeed, relative to a simple thesis for a company, which I saw one that was even just something as simple as sort of automating the process of receipts and or of rebates. And so, like, if you order a certain number of things, you get this amount of rebate. And there was a guy I met in a startup that's doing very, very well. That's really just helping to optimize that across all different contracts. And that's a simple idea, but there's a big market demand for it. And I think that's certainly one of the things, is having something that there's market demand for, and not sort of building some complicated, over-engineered solution. Just speaking as sort of a tech people who's been around a lot of other tech people, we get very enamored of our projects and tend to almost think without thinking, oh, maybe I should reach out and actually speak to someone who might use this and see if that's something they're actually interested in. So
yeah, well, you touched on something very interesting beyond the complexity. And then, you want to see whether someone would actually be interested in this.
Yeah.
And so you go and you reach out to someone or some people. And a lot of us as entrepreneurs are reluctant to do that. And I think part of it is because to be an entrepreneur or start something, it takes a certain amount of ego. It doesn't mean you're egomaniac, but you tend to fall in love with your own ideas. So you don't really want to be bashed by someone else. And so we cannot seek out feedback. That's a big mistake. So yeah, I think two things there. So don't it's not necessary to overcomplicate it. And, you know, you want to get some feedback on there. You want to put your ego aside. It's kind of like when you go to the gym, and I've increasingly realized, like, you know, some of this just comes with experience, aka age. You know, working out and trying to build muscle, and you know, you kind of want to be, as you get older, especially, be more efficient about it. But like, I wish I'd known when I was 18 or like 14 or something, when I first started working out. Like, you know, when you're really young, you try to, as a guy at least, you try to do the macho thing. You lift as much as possible, especially if you're in the gym, right? And now I realize, you know, I mean, the internet's great, particularly YouTube, isn't it? For you can see all these videos on these guys that like got amazing development. And you go back, you can see a lot of these videos from the time of Arnold, and they're saying stuff like, you know, drop your ego. Like, you don't need to lift big weights. So this is kind of a similar sort of thing. You don't have to overcomplicate things. You don't have to be macho. Find something as a pain point. You mentioned the thing.
Yep.
What was that idea that they're doing really well? And it's something to do with like,
automating. It's like automating contracts. So this one was automating rebate between people that are doing particular transactions. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it would be a big hairy thing to a problem for many, or like expenses and stuff. I hate doing expenses.
Yes, exactly.
Like, it's just annoying. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That example, that doesn't surprise me at all. So there you go. So don't overcomplicate it. Don't think you're too smart. Don't think you're too strong. Like, you know, drop your ego. In other words, take it very seriously and talk to people. So, you know, you could just take that.
But I think that's also balanced, right? Because another thing we sort of talked about was the importance of having a bold vision, right? And I think to hop around a little bit, but at the same time, you don't want to be building some niche thing for a small market, because again, that's not going to be something, you know, that, well, certainly once you get to the raising money stage, you know, and that's something that you've got a lot of experience with, and I've done a little bit on. It's you know, the people that are going to be investing in you, or your board of directors, or whoever is involved with the company that you're building, they're going to want to see, is there a big market there? And that comes along with kind of having a bold vision, you know, and I think I've always actually been surprised. I've been pleasantly surprised by people that I see that are pitching something that, like, I'm going to revolutionize kind of, you know, this area or something like that. And it's like, oh, wow, that's actually bolder than I initially thought, you know, and I think we often can get in our own way and sort of like, well, I'm going to carve out this little niche for myself. And, you know, that's not necessarily always good. Sometimes you do want to have a, you know, a big, bold challenge that you're targeting, because, you know, like, okay, yeah, it's going to be hard, but everything in life is hard. And you want to pick the right sorts of hard problems to go after to really make sure that you know, you're making a difference. So
there's a lot in there. I mean, the sort of dichotomy between don't go niche and go really massive. So what do you do? I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with going niche if you're fully aware of where you are on in terms of your business journey. Like, if you never want to take outside investment, particularly from institutional investors like a real VC, or people who are kind of serial angel investors who know the drill and will really want to see a big total addressable market, you know, where you can really be bold and really go after something really big. I mean, they want to really hit it out of the park, right? They're kind of throwing darts. You know, they may do 100 or more investments, and they know that only maybe one or two will pay off. And so it's a different thing to deal with that kind of investor. Really have to talk it up big. Yeah. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with going niche, but you have to be. It's a different thing, right? You're not going to take outside investment. I'm certainly not outside the family.
Right. Yeah. There's absolutely. There's nothing wrong with taking a business model that works and that works well, but that might not scale or that sort of thing. But I think it's real, and it does come down to kind of what you're interested in. I think I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was the CEO of a startup that I was a part of, and she was struggling with this exact problem of is this a good sort of lifestyle company that can that can grow at a regular pace, or do we want to really go for investors and with all of the the additional challenges that come with shooting for a larger thing, and that there's not one right answer to that. It really does depend on what you're doing, and and there's multiple different ways of slicing things, but certainly
Yeah, unfortunately, the investment community over the years has kind of made it into this pejorative thing, niche, or they call that a lifestyle business. They mean it as a kind of insult, like, why would you do that? But of course, well, the success rate in Silicon Valley is actually really quite low, and famously, when venture capital was really flowing, sort of I guess before the end of 2022 or so, in and around there. Then before that time, they really had a lot of businesses that they were just pouring money into and were endlessly unprofitable. And you got some of these people who are running really lean lifestyle businesses, niche businesses, and it does well. So I think that's okay, but at the same time, I do think it's really valuable to have a bold vision, and that's so that you don't kind of hem yourself in, and you don't think too small. Assuming you do want to do something big, but you have to have a big enough market. And I think your goal should be big, especially if you are young. And frankly speaking, by young I mean anyone under 65. Which come as a surprise, but it was Gary Vaynerchuk actually recently really inspired me. I saw him in a couple places talking about how you've got time, like people that are like 40, 50, 60, whatever. I don't have time left. Well, newsflash, people are living a lot longer, and you maintain your health. I think you can do it. So you don't limit your vision either in terms of thinking, it's too late for me, or I'm just going to do this little small thing. I think that's very limiting, and I think it's almost it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you set your goals too low. You stay within that framework, and so I think that's valid for sure.
Isn't there a saying? I'm going to butcher it, but it was sort of like if you shoot for, what's worse, to shoot for the stars and miss, or to shoot for the moon and make it, or something like that. And that I agree with you absolutely. But the other thing is also, you can't kind of boil the ocean, right? There is a bit of strategy to how you roll out, and it's not that you need to start off right away with I'm going to conquer the world, right? It could be, well, I'm going to capture this market, and then I'm gonna expand here and here down the line, but really thinking through that plan and having it mapped out, either internally for yourself as well as for your company, helps to establish that kind of vision for where you're going. And I think it's never too early to kind of have that sort of exercise, because otherwise you can be sort of get so busy in the day-to-day of business that I think that's one of the things I've noticed a lot, is that we don't take enough time to really step back for a second and say, okay, let's check in here and sort of think about things at sort of at a 10,000 foot level, as opposed to just tackling the next thing that's right in front of you. So
that's super important, and I know I have been guilty of that before. And you want to not get caught up so operationally that you get into that. You want to work on your business, not just in your business, and stuff. Yes. Getting that perspective, as my dad would say. And I was going to say to you, though, getting back to the big vision kind of thing and doing stuff. Yeah, you don't want to boil the ocean, but it does help to have a sufficiently large goal, vision, whatever. And I'd ask you a question, Trevor, on that. How do you eat an elephant? Well, I mean, it's kind of proverbial now. One bite at a time, right? So, step by step. Yes, you're not blowing. Yeah, blowing the ocean obviously is a step too far. But having something large, particularly if you really want to make a ton of money, if that's really your goal, and I think that's fine, or which is almost synonymous. Certainly, if you have investors, institutional investors, they will want a market size that's big enough potentially. So you kind of have to say, hey, I'm going to do something. I'm going to eat an elephant, but yeah, how to eat it one step at a time. Yeah, what else can we say? Well, money. Maybe on that topic, we touched on money a little bit there. We talked about it in the sense of goals and stuff. But I think money is very interesting because as Silicon Valley has told us now in the last several years, especially, it's like some of these companies, they threw so much money at them, and yet they haven't made money and they go under, right? So it is it's neither necessary nor sufficient. And I would go so far as to say that money can oftentimes ensure your failure. I'm a big believer that that old adage that necessity is the mother of invention, and that it drives thinking. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. So I'll let you interject there because see what you think about that. But I think that's a really important point to keep in mind. If you have too much money, you become unresourceful. Yes. You'll sometimes you can burn. I've certainly seen this happen that companies will get this new round of investment, and then all of a sudden they go off in like 6 different directions, and then nothing really clicks. And I remember having a investor come speak to us after my startup had just raised, and they said, look, I don't care if you're not profitable for the next couple of months or whatever, but what I want to see is I want to see that direction towards kind of getting the long term, hitting out of the park in the longer term. And so sometimes, absolutely scrounging around. And I mean, I've done a number of things in terms of like making my own conference swag at my kitchen table, before going to a conference, and rather than paying for that big conference booth that costs so much, I just turned myself into a guerrilla booth, and I was walking around with like flyers and t-shirts and just like making it happen myself without having to kind of sit there at a booth, and that worked. I mean, that was quite successful kind of experience. So there's something to be said for kind of just the hustle that you get from like, oh my God, we need to do something here. So I mean, this is hyperbolic, but it's almost a lost art, the hustle, because when you have a lot of money, right? Either you can afford to self-fund it or you get big investment. And so what do people do? It's like, oh, well, let's just throw it at a bunch of Google ads. It's really easy to put that all down the drain really quickly. But doing what you do, I'm a big believer too, in that you need to circulate to percolate, get out there. And wasn't there's that apocryphal story of like Airbnb and like the way that initially they literally just like sold stuff, and they were like packing stuff in shipping boxes. I forget what it was they were selling, but like literally. Didn't they have this? Was it them that also had like something to do with the cereal? They made up cereal boxes. Yes. It must have been cereal. Yeah. No, and I think that kind of folds back into part of the bold vision. It's not just the size of the market and the product and service what you're trying to go after, but it's also how you do it. And it's not just like, let's get a bunch of money and like blow it all on Google ads and stuff like that. No, right. Let's do things that are high impact and are memorable. And there's a good example. Yep. Yeah. And I remember someone at a conference was saying like the booths that he saw were successful had absolutely nothing to, like, they had
they created buzz right in the conference, and it was like literally like, oh, go over there, they're having this like these robots fight each other or something, like they would have some kind of competition happening at the booth, and it generated buzz, and people came by, and while they were there, they learned about the company. So it's there's multiple ways to kind of like generate buzz and publicity, and it doesn't have to follow, and thinking outside the box sometimes can reward you just because everyone else is doing the same. Well, we're going to hand out pens or whatever, stickers at the conference. So
well, because it's seen as the easy and the safe thing to do, and again, especially if you have a lot of money, it's easy just to do the tried and true. And I see it with sales teams too, and sales leaders should know, the good ones anyway, should now have learned better than this, that they're still doing things. Well, let's just hire a big sales team and let's get everybody calling and emailing. It's like, I talk to people like my wife, who's a C-level executive at a big company, and I talked to her recently about this, and I thought it was very interesting. I said, like, what do you do when salespeople reach out to you? So I never even see their emails. Like, she's basically told her IT department, like, make it so this stuff never comes to me.
Yeah.
and it's like, well, that was very eye-opening. Like, I kind of knew this, but like, these people are not getting your messages anymore. They're not getting your emails. Right. They're not getting your calls. It's time to do something differently. Think out of the box. Think outside of the triangle, I would go so far as to say. Certainly outside of your circle of friends, and not to pillory always Silicon Valley, but like, it is pretty easy to take the piss out of them, as the English say. And there's a lot of groupthink that goes on there. And so you would do well, I think, as an entrepreneur, certainly in tech, but anywhere, I guess, to think outside of the box and to don't just do that same old thing again. Don't do the Google ads. And by the way, I don't know if it's ever dawned on anybody that one of the biggest companies there in Silicon Valley, Google, and also Meta, it is very much in their interest to have promoted this idea that, look, just get a bunch of money and throw a bunch of ads and do traditional marketing. Why? Because of course they make more money. So just as a personal example, people who know me know that for years, like, kind of a tried and true. I love dimensional mail, which seems counterintuitive in the day and age where, like, there's so many tech tools that you can use to communicate. But it's kind of because of that, and increasingly you get this kind of overload of noise of all these things. Like, how many LinkedIn messages do you get all the time? And you get these, and now you get automated crap and emails, and like, I'm just tuning it out. And like my wife said, like, she has people to actually make sure she doesn't see this. And so for years, I've done stuff like I will send a pair of socks off to somebody. It's like, I promise to knock your socks off if you meet with me. I do things like, I will literally, I did this recently, actually. I re-recorded John Lennon's Imagine with my own lyrics relevant to something I was pitching, and sent it off in an email as an MP4 to them. And they loved it. So whatever it is that your imagination can do, like, I have that bold vision, like you said. I think that's super important. I love that old Roman phrase, like, fortune favors the bold. Don't ask me for the Latin. I can't remember. But I literally had it painted on my office wall. Not this beautiful one, which I have not yet done because we recently moved about 2 years ago. But I did some painting of slogans that I loved all over my office wall in my basement, and one of them was "Fortune favors the bold." Yeah, my wife's horror when she came down there, and then I did paint it all. This was the stupid thing. I painted it all in dark green on a light background, and when we moved, of course, I had to paint over it, but I had to do like 4 coats. Oh man, that was hard on the back.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta,
and paint favors.
Yeah, like, I believed it so much I put it in dark paint on.
There you go.
So yeah, I think being bold, being creative, super important.
No, I think there's a lot. Creativity is a huge component, and that it'll be helpful to you no matter what you're sort of trying to do. Creative ways of trying to figure out but as you, I love your customer engagement. The socks is fantastic.
It works.
Or,
I basically met
Mhm.
a lot of C-level executives in Toronto in the financial community, like the banks and that, through that very method. And, if you think about it for a second, like, okay, it gets through. I have a whole way of doing it. If you really want to know, like, you can send me a message, listeners, and I can tell you how I actually do it. There's a whole way of doing it, and it's really designed to get through the gatekeeper, right? So that they think it's something that they should pass on, and then open it. It has a big effect, and it's memorable, and then they want to reach out to you and they want to meet you. That's not easy today. So you want to make it work. And I think of Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin. I love that guy, and a lot of things. He's sort of the king of all these great PR stunts. He's famous for saying, like, he's bold, like, screw it, let's do it, right? Like, whatever, what's the worst that can happen, kind of deal. And then he's done all sorts of crazy PR stunts. So I think that's what you got to do. Like, and that's fun. Make it fun. Like, spend some time and right. I figured as long as you're not hurting anybody and you're getting attention, you're not showing up to a conference in Las Vegas naked. Anyone can get attention by just standing there naked. But I don't know if anybody wants to see you or me, kind of.
Well, get your attention in the short term, and get you a long list of legal troubles further down the
line. You might get attention for the wrong reasons. But further on this idea of success for entrepreneurs, what works, what doesn't work. In no particular order, I just kind of jotted these things down. Concentrated effort, I think, is super, super important, right? You can't have a million things going on, because
that's part 2 of the Munger thing. Take it very seriously, right? Yeah.
Take it very seriously. Yeah. Concentrate your effort, work hard. I'd say that staying focused is super important. Like, your success as an entrepreneur will depend to a great degree on what you focus on.
Yes.
Right. And to the degree that you do focus on that. So, what do you think about that, Trevor? Anything to add about focus? Because I think you and I kind of think in similar ways. Like, I don't have your technical brain, like with engineer's brain kind of thing, but like, I do come from a family of engineers. But my dad just to give you a little flavor of who I am, to the extent that I am my father's son. He started out as an artist, as a painter, and decided, I think wisely, that he wasn't likely to make much money off that. So he went off to engineering school and became a mechanical engineer. So, like, he has a bit of both, but I think he was a very focused person, but understood from the art side that you got to get back, get a perspective. So you and I was going to say that they're kind of similar. And it's like, sometimes it's hard to contain the ideas, right? It's great. You have all these bold ideas, but you don't want to have so much. At some point you got to focus. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, no, that's come up over and over again of in my various work that I think in one case we were finding that most of our revenue was coming from only a subset of service related projects that we were producing for people, and sort of leaning into that and saying, okay, well, why don't we take that offering and what can we do to boost the signal on that offering, as opposed to kind of keeping a wide spray of like, oh, we can do everything here, and diluting kind of the efforts that could be generated from, or the revenues could be generated from that one seller that was doing quite well. So you want to you definitely want to focus and prioritize, but I think I really like the sort of the Google approach of, like, they give their people 20% of their time, or like one day a week, to sort of play around and try new things, and that's where Gmail came from, is that it was some guy's sort of side project that they worked on, and it turned out to be something that, like, everybody uses now. So and so I think there's a balance, of kind of, but there's a balance of, you can focus, like you do want to spend most of your time focused on the things that are going to drive your business forward, and whatever those things are, or whatever the bottlenecks are, you want to sort of be aware of them and sort of be monitoring, as well. I think that's something that, you don't always kind of think about, but like, well, where are our efforts going right now, and are they going to the right places? Like, I think we're, as a service-based company, my company now, we're balancing kind of like bringing in clients with being able to making sure that we can deliver and get results back out to those clients, and so I think that requires a certain amount of focus on the existing processes, making sure that we're getting stuff through rapidly enough, and then also making sure that the funnel is open for new clients to come in, and keeping those balanced together. But
and you're not saying in the need to focus that does away completely with, that precludes any kind of experimentation. It's just that when you experiment, you don't necessarily want it to take over everything, and you want to measure it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It has an effect.
And yes. And so it's sort of having processes in place to measure kind of where your efforts are going also is a useful way, because sometimes, like the week can pass and like, oh my God, I was putting up fires this whole week, but I don't know where the week went. Like, even sort of systems that you can have in place that even automatically sort of log certain actions and that kind of thing. It can be very helpful, because you can go back and start to get metrics of like, well, here's where the efforts went, and here's what the success was. And like I said, you can start to then lean into those business drivers that can really help, that are helping you to get closer to kind of making sure the bottom line's doing well. So
yeah, you reminded me something about that. In some of it is looking back, maybe weekly, on what progress you've made, so you keep yourself, or bring yourself back on track more realistically, especially for those people who are creative and have a tendency to think outside the box. And so you got a million ideas. I never have any shortage of ideas. What I have problems with are making sure I have a process in place.
Yeah.
And or whatever that process or non-process is, I bring it back to center line and veer off and get back. Reminded me of a concept that they kind of creatively swiped from total quality management, which is in Kaizen, the idea that how could you improve 1% a day, for example, and become a great car company just by thinking, what are all these things that we can do better, and then just do it. It's like one little bit every day, and that commitment to getting better. And of course that presumes that requires that you measure and track. I think that's super important. But something I'm not, that's not my strength, but I know I need to do it. Maybe because you have that engineering brain, you're more aware of it, even though
I was going to say, you're speaking my language with processes, and that's absolutely something I always want to make sure. Like, if I'm doing this thing now and I'm going to be doing it again, 2 months from now, well, or at least on some sort of regular basis, let's get that down in some sort of document that says this is how I did this thing, because when I go to pick it up again, I'm going to forget, what I did. And I think my dad told me a story about my grandfather, who was a successful entrepreneur, who he liked to only touch a piece of paper once. And so he would deal with the piece of paper, and then it was done. And so, like he sort of took that approach across multiple things. And I think it's definitely useful to be able to, as you say, sort of have processes in place, but not be, but yes, have that right sort of balance of not being overly married to that process, but like in the absence of something, let's get something down as an initial step, and we can always iterate on it, right? Even if it's just I've sent an email out to a couple of people to try and track down some future customers. Well, that's a process, and how do we refine that, and how do we improve that? Because at some point you're gonna be growing, right? And that's something that I notice a lot is onboarding new people, to your organization. There's a whole bunch of you want to get all the stuff that's kind of just floating around in your head in terms of like, well, this is how I did this thing. You want that documented in some form so that it's kind of like, hey, look at this. This is how I was doing these things, and then they can learn from that, and you don't spend as much time in meetings kind of getting them up to speed, and you can also systematize it and get it out to more people as well.
You did that. That was a word my dad would always say to me. So I can remember, he's gone now, but I can remember when I was a kid, often like I'd be shoveling the driveway of snow. Yeah. And I'd be like, okay, I'll go over here, and then I'll go over here and do whatever, like just like wherever my energy takes me. Yeah. And it rings in my ear. I often hear my dad saying this, like, be systematic. I don't want to hear systematic all the time, but it's like, it was sage advice. Be systematic, have perspective on things, put them in, and for those of us who speak British English pronunciation, like Canadians and Brits, a process, right? Have a process.
Yeah.
And I think it's valuable, and measure and iterate. And even, people who are creative and nonlinear thinkers, which tends to be more like me, I think it's important that, because you may come up with something, you may do something amazing. And if you don't capture it,
yes,
it's lost. You probably never do it again. It's like how I cook, which is not the right way to cook, because like literally every single time, I very rarely cooked anything off a recipe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always just, okay, what do we have? I'll just make it up and create. And, maybe they love it. I am a pretty good cook, but it's like, my family will ask me, can you cook that again? It's like, nope, that's a one-off thing. You'll never get it again, because I don't know what was in it. So obviously that's not the right way to do, but I am in the moment when I'm cooking. So that's a little different from entrepreneurship and being successful there. But I do think,
but I think there's elements, and I think
don't beat yourself too much off the path.
And then another thing you said that was very important that I just captured was that I knowing what you're not good at, and kind of like understanding yourself as you go through this process is also very, very, very important, so I know that I'm bad at certain elements of, whether it's kind of keeping track of stuff. I know I can do a lot of stuff kind of at the same time, but I'm bad at sort of certain elements of like, I need to sit down, I need to do this, I need to do that, so I think making sure you understand, and particularly when it comes to starting a company with multiple people, that you understand several things about both yourself and of your team. Knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at helps you to ask for help in those areas where you don't have strength, and that helps to make sure that kind of overall you guys are functioning effectively, and that has a number of benefits, and not only that, but also kind of knowing your how your personalities mesh or not mesh. Hopefully you've known each other for some time before starting the company, but that also is very important for setting yourself up for success, basically.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. I mean, it's inspired some thoughts about how true that is. To be able to identify, first of all, by yourself, identify your weaknesses and strengths to the extent that you already know them. But there are some strengths and weaknesses you probably are not aware of that you have.
Absolutely, yes.
If you're in a business with employees, or particularly co-founders, early employees, I think it's really important to be candid with each other. I don't agree with this idea of radical candor, because I think that like it probably ends up in fucking fights. Pardon my Swahili, but so candidness to the extent that you can help convey to the other what you
Absolutely.
think their strengths and weaknesses are, such that not necessarily so much that they can improve them. It's like, okay, you're not good at this, so like this might help you, but I think you should do this, right? They may not be in the right role or be doing the right tasks, so maybe you should do this and not this, but you know, I can do this but not that. You have to be able to ID that, and to be able to identify those strengths and weaknesses and convey them then requires candidness, which kind of comes back. This seems like the theme of the day to me, Trevor.
Mhm.
So is boldness, right? Your boldness in your communication, both to your would-be investors, your would-be clients, your would-be co-workers, and I think it's very relevant to the idea of being able to identify your strengths and weaknesses, and therefore aligning yourself on the right parts of your business. And
Yes.
you want the best people in the company working on the things that they're best at, the person who's best at it.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yeah. What's that saying of you know, Einstein, if you teach a goldfish to climb a tree, you know, like you don't want to spend all your time teaching goldfish to climb a tree or something.
I've actually seen that somewhere on the internet, and it is actually pretty cool. I have a suspicion it's not real, but hey.
Yeah. But yeah, just a second sort of the idea of, well, of being candid with one another, and potentially also, you know, with the understanding that there's ways of being candid that you know, don't necessarily hurt people's feelings. And
I've said this for many years. I wonder how you feel about this term. Just to that, I think it's important for people to be candid, but be diplomatically assertive.
I like that phrase. Yeah, that's a good phrase.
Yeah, because you know there are too many radically candid assholes out there. I really need to find more words other than the occasional swear word. I do it too much, so I apologize to my listeners in Utah.
We'll figure it out. No, but yeah, you know, I think there's ways of, and it's kind of like, hey, look, it's kind of what you said, you know, about, well, not necessarily that like maybe this isn't a good fit for you, but you know, you could be working on this thing instead. And you know, like there's definitely there's a way of approaching it. But I think you don't want, what you don't want to get trapped in is the trap of sort of being so polite that, and I mean, this is a very Canadian thing as well, right? Is the one of the big problems with Canadian being, you know, doing business in Canada is that people will yes you to death, but never actually commit to, you know, whether it's a sale or something else. And I'd much rather get a no in the first meeting than to be strung on for, you know, for meetings and meetings and meetings just to get that no at the end of the day, because we're never really interested, you know. I think and that goes for working with coworkers too. I'd much rather hear a criticism, so long as it's kind of, you know, not mean-spirited, but you know, identifies a flaw that's happening. I'd much rather hear it sooner than for it to build up into something big that is a big blow up later. You know, like tell me about it now, and I can correct my behavior or what have you.
Yeah,
So.
you just reminded me. I know you said it's Canadian politeness. I don't necessarily think Canadians are all that polite, but you know, or direct and blunt as say the Americans or the Koreans are. And I can say that because I'm married to a Korean, and I studied a lot about Korean history and lived in Korea for a while. And there's a lot of goodness to that. But you know, the Canadians and even more so Japanese, where I also live. I lived in Tokyo for 5 years. Audience, and so Japanese people are kind of famous for wanting to avoid any kind of conflict, and I think it holds them back. There are many times I've been in meetings. It's like, yeah, okay, that's really great. Like I'm pitching them something. It's like, you know what? Let's meet again in a couple of weeks, and then we meet again, and then this goes on. And I
Right.
remember very clearly there was a Japanese fellow, he's an executive. It was for a now defunct airline, AOM French Airlines, right? It was trying to be a competitor to Air France. And at that time, I was working in a media company, my day job. This might have been before I started my business there. And I was trying to sell him advertising. And he's like, yep, I like it. So, we had a couple of niche English language publications, and shout out to Tokyo Weekender and Tokyo American Magazine. And so trying to sell this to them, I thought this would be great for AOM because they're selling to expats, right? Who are going back and forth. And so we decided, and he's like, okay, let's do it. And he literally said to me, how's that for like something like, like an American style way of doing it? It's like, yeah, I love it. Because he was very fully aware of the kind of hemming and the hawing, the hi. Hi does not mean really yes. It means yes, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
So, I don't want to pillory the Japanese because I love Japan, but all of us, different cultures have good things, but yeah, that is not a strength of the Japanese. Directness. They can learn a lot from the Koreans. They'll probably all hate me now for that, but whatever. This is great. Like, do you have anything more to really add to this one? Like I said at the outset, I think this one talking about success and entrepreneurship, and there's so much just you and I have learned. We'll also have some people on the podcast in the future, entrepreneurs that will be able to give so many great stories and things. But do you want to add a story or two before we kind of, and maybe there's a moral in that before we bring it to an end, and I can maybe dig into my own as well?
Yeah, well, I think I've said a few ones that I've been involved in. I'm trying to think if there's one, for example. It's not a very long story, but just maybe along the lines of being bold, was that I was connected with. I've usually been pretty open with like connecting with people on LinkedIn. And there was one connection that I thought, well, why don't I just reach out and say, hey, I'm going to be at this conference, maybe we could meet up. And that was, that one step, like, yes, it was kind of a little outside of my comfort zone because I didn't really know this guy aside from just seeing his posts every once in a while. But
it wasn't Elon Musk.
It was not Elon Musk. No, I'm not a, I don't think he even uses LinkedIn, most likely. But I reached out to him and we connected at the conference, and then that turned into kind of like one of our best clients that we've had with my company over several years now. And so that one thing was, kind of really instrumental in, and it was a combination of sort of like keeping those relationships warm, which I think we haven't talked about, but that's a whole other conversation in itself of just keeping in touch with people. Hey, how's it going? And this one kind of like, oh, it'd be great to connect with you at the conference turned into like, oh, well, we've got all of these things we need help with. And it was really an amazing kind of connection that turned into valuable business. So
you just reminded me of something. We need to talk about this on a future episode, but I'll mention it now. There's a couple of things there. Hey is like having the courage, the boldness again. And like Branson says, screw it, let's do it. What's the worst that can happen? So he thinks he'll right. Cares, right? Is he going to come knock down your door and like tell you off? Like, so what? So be bold in your communications and how you do it, whatever. But I was thinking this book many years ago when I lived in New York City, and I still remember, in the day and age where we still have lots of, like, you go to the newsstand or whatever, and you'd have newspapers and magazines. I still remember this thing, and it was the title. I don't remember I think the name of the publication was Business 2.0, which I'm sure is long gone now. But it was a picture of this fellow, and it was like America's Best Networker. And I'm like, okay, I want to know, right? Hey, I like to network, but I want to know, what is this guy doing? And so he was the youngest ever chief marketing officer of a Fortune 500 company, aka Deloitte, or specifically Deloitte. And his name is Keith Ferrazzi. He lives in LA. He's an American guy. Maybe it's because obviously he also has Italian roots, unless he's adopted with that surname. But he wrote this book, called Never Eat Lunch Alone. It was a bestseller. So some of you on this podcast ultimately may have heard of it. And he's all about that. Like, how do you network and how do you reach out to people? Do you reach out to everyone? A big thing I remember he was really doing was he would hold these dinner parties. We got to do some dinner parties.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
My wife's in LA every other month, so every other week almost. So like maybe when she's away, because she's a total introvert. So we'll have little intimate dinner parties at my place or your place or elsewhere. Because that's a big way in which he did it. And I remember back in the day where, in first class, where before the day and age of the pods, right?
Mm-hmm.
You like sit next to somebody if you were lucky enough to fly in first class. And he was a consultant at Harvard Business School alum. And so he was a consultant, I guess, that started at Deloitte. And one of the ways in which he built himself up in that, his profile was he would, every single time he flew, he would like either through the points he'd accumulated or like throwing his own money in there, he would make sure as much as possible to fly first class. And then he would talk to these people. And then things like that and being bold. Like, you're talking about sitting next to a Fortune 500 CEO when you're a really young person. Like, you might be intimidated by that. But that old adage of like, hey, at the end of the day, they still put, or at the start of the day, they put their pants on one leg at a time. I know several billionaires, a couple of them pretty well. And that's absolutely 100% true. So like, be bold, get out there. But that's a good book if you want to look it up. Never Eat Lunch Alone. That tells you everything. So it goes back to something I said earlier. I really love is you got to percolate to circulate and be bold, do it. Go next conference you go to, take Trevor's advice. Yeah. Get your own t-shirts made up, right, Trevor?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that was actually the reason I started stand-up comedy was at being at this huge international conference, like 20,000 attendees, and just feeling intimidated like by going up to booths of like potential competitors and saying, hey, like, is there a way that we can work together, kind of thing, and kind of having enough self-knowledge to say, okay, well, that's something I need to actually work on, because I can't run a successful business if I'm intimidated to sort of approach people. So that in my head at least turned into, well, how do I overcome, like the kind of self, how do I overcome sort of being inhibited? And the thought was like, well, try stand-up comedy, because it's something I've been a fan of for like my entire life. And just thought that, well, why don't I, if I put myself out there, and what's the worst you can do in stand-up comedy? Well,
I think that's a very useful frame of thinking. What's the worst thing that can happen?
Yes.
And I typically, as I understand who you are, and more, we will know more about each other. But you do kind of think things through. I'm much more of a worse kind of like just a people person, and just think of it. I'll just kind of do it. But rather than thinking about how I can do it, it just kind of came organically for me. But that I used to be a very shy teenager, and I do think getting out and doing stuff that makes you better. I went to 4 different high schools. That helped me, right? Because you can imagine, when you're in high school, you're very awkward at the beginning. Like my first high school I went to, I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, here in Canada, and then I got bussed off to, go figure, McMullan, Irish name. My mother's from Dublin, and sent me off by bus over to Burlington to this Catholic school. I went there for 3 weeks, and then we went to another school up in Guelph, right? And then you're just, if you miss those first few weeks, it is so hard to get in, right? And then doing that 4 times and trying to figure out how to insinuate yourself into these groups, that helped me a lot. I also want to give some props here to my crazy ex-girlfriend in Tokyo. It's funny how things come into your life, and what's the worst that can happen? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Came home from work one night. Still remember, I was spending pretty much all my income on this like really expensive apartment. It's just off of Mochasando, Jingu-mai. For those who know Tokyo, along Mochasando is like the Champs-Elysees of Tokyo. At the time, Tokyo was the most expensive city in the world. And I got home, and I could still remember, I don't know, she'd been peeling vegetables or something like that. I came on, it's some argument over some inane thing, which I genuinely cannot remember. So I don't think it was anything big that I'd really done, but she was upset. And I'm not kidding. That I remember we had this vegetable peeling. You ever see that, vegetable peeling knife? Do you ever do that with your wife, with Jen? Like, you got those really sharp vegetable peeler knives. They're super sharp. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I still remember this thing had like about a 4 or 5 inch blade on it with this orange handle. And so she picked up this thing, and that in this house we had, there's, it was a house. It was apartment. It was like the kitchen. There was like a middle, like a living area, and then there was like a foyer and like kind of traditional style what would have been rice paper, now glass, the sliding doors, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one from the kitchen to the middle room was open, and the one from the foyer where you came in and put your shoes and slippers in there, that was closed. And she came after me with a knife and slashed me on the forearm. I still got a little scar on my back from that, where she tried to stab me.
Oh my God.
And got away from that. She obviously had some emotional problems, but I don't hold any grudge against her. But I'm just trying to mention this to you is because, like, hey, that didn't kill me. I could very well have died right there.
Right. Wow.
Someone just snapped on me. And so when these things happen to you, I think you can either be crushed by it, or you can just think like, hey, this adds to the tapestry of your life. These are all great stories. And so I think that's part about developing resilience.
Yes.
Difficult things, and also train your mind. You can even go back and look at all the crazy things that have happened. All of us have had something to some degree crazy happen. And I think we want to learn from that. It's like, hey, I survived that. I did other great things after that. So I can, I can continue to do even better. So you're going to have that resilience, because to be a successful entrepreneur, successful at anything, right? Even if you're working for someone else or in school. I mean, obviously you and I did well at school. I certainly wasn't the smartest person at Waterloo or Harvard, but like, I worked my butt off. And so you need to do difficult things academically and business, and look back on those things and don't let them, like, use them as a springboard, I guess. Like, sorry, I'm going on a little bit, but yeah, I really believe that what doesn't kill you should make you stronger. And what's the worst that can happen? You're probably not going to get almost stabbed to death by a crazy woman in Tokyo.
Yeah, no. And I think I've heard it said that, like, if you're not doing difficult things, if you're not doing things that are outside of your comfort zone, you're never going to sort of grow, So it can be very easy to get stuck in sort of a routine, and we're creatures of habit, and we like to sort of know what we're doing each day, but getting outside of that comfort zone and trying things that are new and trying things that are maybe scary, do it once and just see what happens, and
oh yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I don't mean to harp on it, but it'll be something that I come up with, because that 5 years that I spent in Tokyo and also for about a year in Seoul, South Korea, like, so many experiences there. And going off for the first time to Tokyo from Vancouver, I was living with my folks at the time. It's like, I half thought it was like part Ridley Scott's Blade Runner with geisha running around. You don't see geisha in Tokyo unless you go out with very, very well-to-do Japanese business people who can afford, and I'm not exaggerating, to take you to these places where it's like $50,000 for a few guys to like see geisha. Forget it. So I think you've got to do those bold things. You've got to screw it. Let's do it. And you know what? If you fail, as my lovely sister said to me years ago, I really took this to heart. I think I was like worrying about something that gone wrong or bummed out about it. She's like, nothing's ever lost. It's either immediately applicable right after, or at some point it becomes part of your learning, and or it becomes part of your character for the better. Like,
yeah. And I think, wasn't it Steve Jobs who said, like, you live your life going forwards, but like, you understand your life by looking backwards, and you see various parts that, like, okay, well, I was working on that thing and that failed, but that led me to understand. I mean, I was part of a company, a startup company that I founded, that I left. And I left it in part because I was doing it as sort of a side gig while I had a regular job that was actually kind of competing with the startup that I was working on, and it just didn't work out. Like it wasn't the right thing. But having that experience kind of taught me, that if it's something, as you said, you have to kind of leap into and work on 100%. And it is definitely something that it takes a lot of effort to really work on, on what you're doing and make sure that things get done well. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add to that. You remind me of how, you kind of want to, I don't know why this, just what you said reminded me of this, but I think it's important, especially when you're starting out, you don't have any money, like you don't have a bunch of money to spend on advertising or other types of promotion on your business or whatever, or even if it hasn't started yet, just go out and tell people what you're doing or what you're going to do. You'll be amazed how things come your way. Like people will offer to help, or hey, I'm very interested in that. They will give you ideas. They'll help shape the business. So just go out, like tell everybody. Don't be afraid. Again, that's the theme of today. It's developed. It's like just be bold and challenge yourself, and don't be afraid. So yeah, screw it. Let's do it. And that's probably a good point at which to finish today's episode. Don't you think, Trevor?
Sounds good. Sounds good to me.
We've got other things coming up, and in future, please stick with us. I know we're going to learn. Trevor's probably going to go through and give us a whole bunch of process so we can make their process make it better. But yeah, we promise we have access to some really, really cool people. So we will be bringing them on board. But it's just starting with us, and we're learning, and we want to learn with you. So yeah, feel free to comment in there, and yeah, feel free to contact us even directly, reach out on LinkedIn, whatever you want to do. So thanks very much for those of you who listen this far, and we look forward to hearing from you again and giving you some more great stuff.
Then make sure you like and subscribe so that you can hear more of us rambling on about various things.
100%. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys.
All righty. Thanks a lot. Cheers.